Welcome everyone, Christine here with my mage gearing guide for both tier 4 and tier 5, as well as talking about the 5 items that you want to prioritize in tier 5 above all others. What are the items that you really care about as a mage? I'll start with tier 4, then move on to tier 5, and then I'll talk about the items. Now, there are some things to say right off the bat. The spec is Arcane because Arcane is the highest damage mage spec. Forget all the nonsense about fire mages. Screw the warlocks. They're greedy assholes with their fire specs anyway, if it even is really worth it. You shouldn't care. Even in tier 4. In tier 5, Arcane is potentially the highest damage dealer on single target in the entire raid, if supported properly. So Shadow Priest, Mana Tide, Enervates. It does take a whole support structure to help an Arcane Mage, but the damage is there, at the very least, in tier 5. I mean, Malgar was killed by a raid stacked with Arcane Mages in a very short period of time. There is a reason why Arcane is powerful. Anyway, first things first, let's talk a bit about spec and how it relates to your stats. You have Arcane Focus, which basically gives you 10% hit for Arcane spells. So you only need 6% hit. If even that, that's the thing, by the way, if even that, if you were maybe magically put in a group with an Elemental Shaman, you wouldn't even need that. So basically hit for you has no real value. Now, you shouldn't be put in a group with an Elemental Shaman. You care more about the Shadow Priest, you care more about the Mana Tide from Resto Shaman. But if you were, you would only need 3% hit, which is basically nothing. Now, so Arcane Focus, then there is Mind Mastery, which gives you 25% of your intellect is converted into spell damage. Beyond that, you want to have Icy Veins from Frost, maybe even Cold Snap, though it's not really important. And the one thing every single mage should have is Improved Blizzard as well as Permafrost. Why that? Because if you're trying to tank a lot of mobs with a Paladin tank, one of the strategies to use that's really effective with the mage doing Improved Blizzard is to have the Paladin drop Consecrations and basically kite the mobs in a circle. It works on Morgrim Morlocks, it works on a bunch of trash packs that's worth doing. It's very powerful to have in a lot of situations. Don't ignore this. Though it is worth saying that an Arcane Mage will do a great deal of damage with Arcane Explosion. With Arcane Impact, with all the Arcane gear they're stacking, you will do a great deal of damage. In fact, this is the real benefit of an Arcane Mage. Yes, you have to be close in range, but you can beat the Warlock spamming Seed if you spam Arcane Explosion. Very mana intensive, but you can do more damage or be on par with them with that. So those are the kind of things you care about. You don't strictly need Magical Attunement, though it might be useful in some situations. Anyway, so with that said, let's start with tier 4. Some of it is pretty straightforward, some of it not necessarily so. Helmet, the tier 4 Crown of the Aldor, Spell Crit, Damage and Healing, Meta Gem. It's really the Meta Gem. Like, if it wasn't for the Meta Gem, for having those Spell Crit, 3% increased critical damage Meta Gem, it would really be Spell Strike in terms of the helmet. But because we have the Meta Gem, because Blizzard made that decision, it is the tier 4 helmet. To be honest, you can use any gem that just has a meta gem, but yeah, the tier 4 one is the obvious choice there. Cliff of Power, spell damage, and spell hit rating. You don't care about spell hit rating, but honestly, you don't really have many options as a mage over there. Necklace, Adornment of Stolen Souls from Prince Malchezaar, spell crit, int, damage and healing. Like, that's the thing, you don't need hit, so you can go with crit, you can go with more spell damage. That's the real benefit of an Arcane Mage. That's why they're so powerful, because they don't give a crap about having a lot of hit, which is an enormous benefit that other casters just simply don't have. A lot of casters have to make those kind of sacrifices. Shoulders, Pauldrons of the Aldor. You can use maybe the Gladiator ones if you so desire. They're not too bad. In fact, they're not far behind at all. But the tier 1s have more int, they have Spirit. The Spirit helps with Innervates, of course, so don't ignore it. Cloak, Brute Cloak of the Ogre Magi. Now, if you can get it, of course, the Ancient Spell Cloak of the Highborn is probably the better decision, though you do have less int on that. You just gain a benefit of spell power, but you do lose some crit. I think for vast majority of people, the Brute Cloak of the Ogre Magi is a great choice. If you are going to play Frost or Fire at any point, then yeah, having the Ruby Drape with the Mystic Intent in your inventory is a pretty solid decision. Anyway, Chest, and this is one you want to have, don't skip on this. Chest is Spellfire. Not only does it have a great deal of arcane and fire damage, it also has spell crits, 2 gem sockets, good intellect, decent intellect at the very least. Less than the tier 4 one, but overall significantly better. And the free set of Wrath of the Spellfire, 7% spell damage increase of your total intellect. It just stacks so nicely with Arcane. By the way, Spellfire Robe isn't just your best in slot for tier 4, it's your best in slot for tier 5 as an individual piece. Even if you're not going to have the Wrath of the Spellfire set, you still want to have this. So yeah, tailoring Spellfire, I know it's expensive, but you want to go for BIS, this is BIS. Plain simple. Spellfire set is the BIS. Same idea with the gloves, same idea with the belt. That's just how it is. If there is something you don't want to skip on in terms of paying money for, it is Spellfire as an Arcane Mage or a Fire Mage. It doesn't matter. Go for it. It's worth your time. The pieces themselves, like the boot, the belt itself is also best in slot for tier 5. The gloves, not so much, but it's like, yeah, the belt, like if you're going to make anything, make the rope, make the belt. You're going to use them for a long time. They're really good. You're going to use them until tier 6 as an Arcane Mage. Chest, 6 to all stats, 2% reduced fret on cloak. Not that it matters, fret shouldn't be too much of an issue, but hey, what are we gonna go for? Shoulders, spell crit, like you should be scryers and you should get the greater inscription of the orb. Then bracers, general silk cuffs. Like you could go for bracers of havoc if you so desire, if you want to go for that higher spell damage as opposed to having spell crit. But the general silk cloak, they have stamina, which is useful sometimes having that extra HP. You are losing 10 spell damage, but you gain 12 spell crit. So, and you gain a bit more intellect. Though base bracers of havoc crafted is also a really solid choice. You can go with the bracers of nefarious steeds as well if you just don't want to grind honor. Yeah, the bracer of havoc are a pretty solid choice. Bracer bands of nefarious steeds or the crimson's bracers of gloom, but you don't need hits, so yeah. Weapon! The actual best in slot here is the Talent of the Tempest. It has less spell damage, sure. It has less int, but it has those 2 gem sockets. And those gem sockets are going to more than make up for it. But it's from Doomwalker. And most people won't be able to get this. Vast majority of the player base won't be able to get this. It's one thing to make a BIS list. It's another thing to make a fantasy unicorn list, and that's what I view Talent of the Tempest. It's a unicorn item. If you can get it, great! Vast majority of people won't be able to, but if you can get it, use it. It's better than anything else. Naphrazim, like when you look at Naphrazim, like you consider that it has 2 less crit, more int, so it's really worth it more than Magus Blade. But of course, Blood Maw is very strong in its own right. Offhand, you can go, the best choice is obviously the Talisman of Galagos. You can go with the Talisman of Nightbane if you just want the crit. You have various choices, but yeah, Galagos is the better choice. Gloves and belt, as I said, Spellfire, Pants, Spellstrike, though how important these are, that's your decision. For what it is worth, they are the best decision. They have the best stats. Overall, like the 7 circle, yeah, you get you lose 1 spell crit, you do gain more int, but like the 7 circle are the best, but they are from Kazakh, so same issue as with the weapon. If you can get these, great, they are best in slot, but spell strike are going to be going to be the realistic best in slot for people. Boots of Foretelling from Maiden of Virtue, spell crit, damage and healing int. You can also go with the Ruby Slippers if you want to. Like, they do have more spell damage. They do have more int. Of course, they have hit and they don't have gem sockets, but they're a pretty decent choice regardless. Or really the Sigil, or really the second best choice is probably the Sigil-laced boots, which are from Arcatraz. Well, Arcatraz normal, not heroic, so don't worry about having to do that. They're pretty solid. Yeah, they have less int, they have less spell damage, but until you get the Boots of Foretelling, go for those, aim for those. Assuming you can get the group. Rings. A lot of people would go for the Band of the Crimson Fury. I really don't understand the logic behind that, since you don't need hit. What you should go is Ring of Recurrence, which is from the chess event, though you might struggle getting it. So if you don't get the Ring of Recurrence, honestly, try and do... It's probably worth it from my perspective to get the Sparkling Arcanite Ring more than the Band of the Crimson Fury, just because you get the spell crit on that as well. So that's probably worth losing some intense spell damage. At least that's from my perspective. Trinkets, there are various choices. There's always a discussion about the Pendant of the Violet Eye. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? The one trinket everyone wants to have is Icon of the Silver Crescent, and then you want to have an arsenal of trinkets available, like Quack's Eye, for instance. You can have that. Quack's Eye is a really good choice. Or if we scroll down, probably all the way down, there is, I believe there is the Blackwing Lurching guy. I just can't find it on this list. You do have the Restrained Essence of Saffron, though I am fairly certain that you can't use the icon and the essence at the same time, which is a bit of a problem. Just remember that trinket cooldowns are can be an issue for you to deal with. But there's plenty of choices of trinkets, including the Blackwing Lair. Like, you can also get the lightning capacitor. Plenty of discussions about a lightning capacitor. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? If you're an elemental shaman, absolutely, it's damn well worth it. But if you're a mage, not necessarily so much. Then of course you can get the Mark of the Champion if you're dealing with undead. Like, there's plenty of trinkets from vanilla, and of course the one that quite a few people argue is really good, the Mind Quickening Gem. This is what I was looking for on this list, the Mind Quickening Gem, which people feel is best. Some people feel it's best, maybe not for Arcane, probably for Fire, until even Sunwell Plateau. There's a lot of discussions about trinkets, but you can't do wrong having the Icon of the Silver Crescent, and then as your second trinket, Quack's Eye or Pendant of the Violet Eye, or plenty of choices. Don't bother with Eye of Macfaridan. You won't really get that issue. You may get the Restrained Essence of Saffron if you so desire. The benefit, I think, of Pendant is like, you would start a fight with Bloodlust and using your cooldowns, popping out of that, then popping Icon. Then you would use Pendant to get your mana regen up. That's how you'd do that to get your mana up once you're really starting to struggle for mana. Anyway, that is tier 4. Moving on to tier 5. Moving on to the main menu of this video. Now, with tier 5, there is discussions to be had about how many tier 5 pieces do you want. The answer is all of them. Yeah, I'm not joking on this. You actually want to get all of the pieces. Not necessarily to use in tier 5 itself, but later down the line in tier 6, it might be important. Why is that? Well, for an Arcane Mage, which can beat Fire even in Sunwell Plateau, or at least be on par with it, for an Arcane Mage, the 4 set is really the way to go. So you're going to be using tier 5 all the way until the end of the game. But the question is, which pieces do you want to use of tier 5? Well, in tier 5 itself, for a chess piece, Spellfire is better than Robes of the Tirisfal, but you do want that 4 set later on the line. And the tier 6 pants are better than the tier 5 ones, even for Arcane. And here's the thing. As an Arcane Mage, when you're looking down the line in tier 6 and Sunwell Plateau, when you're looking at Sunwell Plateau, you gotta understand this. You can have a 4 set tier 5 and 4 set tier 6 at the same time. So the question is, which piece do you sacrifice to be able to use the pants? Now, so as I said, for purposes of actually doing tier 5, you want to use Spellfire. Once you get into tier 6, you'd want to replace the pants with the tier 6 ones and switch to the tier 5 chess piece. It's the better option for the long term. So you want to get all of the pieces. And I'll tell you which pieces you should prioritize. But anyway, so helmet, tier 5 helmet. So let me just get this all over with. So helmet, shoulders, chest, gloves, pants, tier 5. The one piece you don't prioritize at the very start is the chest piece, because you would actually use Spellfire. Don't go for the vestments of the Sea Witch. It's like, oh, it's the best. No, it's not. It isn't the best piece. I mean, like, consider the vestments versus the Spellfire robes. you have slightly less crit, but you have more spell damage on that, on Spellfire. Yes, you have more int on Vestments. Again, it's like the spell damage increase from Spellfire makes it better than the Vestments of the Sea Witch. And on top of that, Vestments of the Sea Witch are things that other people would want. Every Warlock worth a damn is going to want Vestments of the Sea Witch, and not just the Warlocks, to be very clear. You don't need it, don't be a greedy prick. That's also another factor. And it's not even the best in slot for you. Whereas for them, it is the best in slot for them. So yeah, you get to hold the tier 5 pieces, even if you're not going to use more than 4 pieces. Get the robe last. The chest piece last from Kael'thas. Next, Sun King's Talisman from the Kael'thas Verdant Sphere quest. You might be one of the few people for which you would be using this a very long time. Other casters wouldn't. I think it's like the list of people who actually want the Verdant Sphere are Prop Paladins, Elemental Shamans, and you. Right? Beyond that, you can, of course, still use the Adornment of Stolen Souls. You can get the PvP neck when it comes out, but it's not as good as some other choices. And one neck that you should have as well, you should aim for, is the Pendant of the Lost Ages. This is going to be useful in some specific boss fights, so healers may want to prioritize this. The guild might want to prioritize giving this to healers, but for any spellcaster, this is going to be useful on certain fights. What fights, you might ask? Well, Asgalor in Mount Hyjal, as the first example. He has a silence. Arcamont, potentially. Maybe a Reliquary Soul, not quite entirely certain on that one, but certainly Asgalor, maybe Arcamont, maybe a Reliquary, maybe. Because it reduces the duration of any silence interrupt effect against the wearer by 20%. There is a neck that drops from Blood Furnace Heroic that has a similar effect, but it's just a worse item overall. Cloak. You can keep using the High King Mulgar Cloak. You can, and still aim, of course, for Kazakh one. Or you can get the Kael'thas Cloak, which has a great deal of spell damage and healing. You are going to lose crit for that, but if you want the tier 5 cloak option, it is the Royal Cloak of the Sunstriders. I think the only people that really want this are maybe Prop Paladins, and honestly, Prop Paladins should probably aim for having the PvP Cloak, the Sergeant Heavy Cape anyway, if they can afford it. But it's a pretty solid choice for them as well. Bracers, which I think every single caster worth a damn is going to want. The Mindstorm wristbands, int, spell crit, spell damage. Like, just a better choice than the alternatives. You can also get the Zone Drop, the Crystal Weave bracers. Have fun with that, by the way. They're not too bad. In fact, they have actually pretty decent stats. But yeah, the Mindstorm wristbands are the best choice. Weapon, Fang of the Leviathan. Some best lists, the Wowhead ones, like, oh, get the Nexus Key. I cannot imagine a universe in which the Nexus Key is better than having Fang of the Leviathan and Phantom Stone or any offhand, really. Because, yeah, you may not have as much int or crit with those items combined, but you are going to have more spell damage, so I just can't imagine. Unless you're struggling for an offhand, and you do have a Badge of Justice one as an Arcane Mage, so it's like, what's the discussion here? Fang of the Leviathan is the best choice. Nexus Key is just a cheap option. It's not too bad, but yeah, you just want to go with that combination of main hand and offhand. Speaking about offhand, the Phantom Stone is the tier 5 choice. You can still use the Talisman of Caligos. Not really too much of improvement. You're trading spell damage for crit. Do you want to do that? I don't know. Like, that's something you have to decide for yourself. But for what it's worth, Phantom Stone is the tier 5 choice. It's basically the only offhand in it. And then, boots, like belt, yeah, Spellfire, you keep using Spellfire. You would be using the Spellfire chest as well, into tier 5. Belt, Spellfire is just a better choice. Like, we look at some of the other options, like the Cord of the Screaming Turret has Spell Hit, not important. Belt of Blasting. Well, Belt of Blasting, if we look at it, the one benefit of Belt of Blasting is you might be able to drop Spellfire Tailoring with it. Like, you may not want to maintain Spellfire Tailoring, so that's the one real benefit of Belt of Blasting. But I look at it, you lose all the int you have from Spellfire Belt, you gain more crit, keep the same spell damage and gain useless hit. So do you feel that trade-off is worth it? I don't believe so, but I do think the Belt of Blasting is just that kind of belt you can use if you want to drop Spellfire Tailoring. It's your decision. And yeah, you can use the tier chest against Spellfire Robe if you want to do that as well, if you're interested in making that decision. But that's a luxury as I see it for a mage. Boots, Velvet Boots of the Guardian from Lurker Below. Just a better choice, really. Boots of Foretelling, Velvet Boots of the Guardian. You gain more spell crit, you gain more spell damage, you lose the gem sockets. So you're going to lose some int, because that's what you gem for mostly as a mage. You gem for intellect. At least that's what a lot of people are doing, certainly. But I know 20 free spell damage versus 2 gem slots. I'd take that choice, to be honest. And you also gain Spirit, which helps you with Innervate. Don't ignore that. It's still a stat that's worth considering. Rings, honestly, I'd say keep the ones that you get from tier 4. This is the thing about Burning Crusade. See, gearing-wise, and the mage, I think, is a clear example of this. Even though, as an Arcane Mage, you obviously want the tier 5, the 4 set or even 5 set of tier 5, there's other items that the upgrades are not really that significant compared to what you get in tier 5. That's, by the way, why Blizzard is mistaken in splitting tier 4 from tier 5, because there's going to be plenty of people that aren't going to gain that many upgrades in tier 5, or they're not as substantial as they could be. Choices wise, though, in terms of tier 5 ring, yes, you do have the Ring of the Endless Coils. You lose int, you don't have int, great. You have the Band of Alar, you lose the spell crit. So honestly, just keeping, you can get those rings if you so desire, but honestly, I just say Violet Signet of the Archmage and Ring of Recurrence are probably the choices you want to keep. And then trinkets, the only difference between tier 4 trinkets and tier 5 is you get this lovely, lovely baby, the Serpent Coil Braid. Spell crit, spell hit, useless, but when you gain 25% more mana when you use a mana gen. Additionally, when using a mana gen, you get 225 spell damage for 15 seconds. This trinket is what makes Arcane Mage viable. It's the most important item you can get. And then, of course, as for Wand, which I forgot to talk about in tier 4, but Wand-wise, yeah, the Eredar Wand of Obliteration from Macferidon is the best choice. You can get Wand of the Forgotten Star if you're not doing Macferidon anymore, or you can just settle for the Tersfall Wand of Ascendancy. I don't believe I have ever seen the Eredar Wand of Obliteration. In all the years that I've played TBC, I don't think I've seen it drop once, or maybe once or twice, and I didn't pay attention because that doesn't really matter that much. Like, you can use the Wand of the Forgotten Star, you lose the int and stamina, but yeah, Eredar Wand of the Obliteration is the item you want to go. And that's it in terms of gearing as an Arcane Mage. Alright, what items are actually a prior for you to get as an Arcane Mage in tier 5? That's the big question. Well, the Serpent Coil Braid is the biggest and most important item you can get. It drops from Orgrim Tidewalker. Only mages can use it, and many guilds are only going to have, what, 1, 2, maybe 3 in some extreme cases in their roster. You get this trinket. This is going to change your life as an Arcane Mage. This is a trinket that makes Arcane Mage go from a pretty solid DPS to top dog in tier 5, and you're going to use it pretty much for the rest of the game. So by far ahead in terms of priorities for you as an Arcane Mage, Serpent Coil Brand tops the list by far and away. The second most important item, well, I would probably have to say a neck. Not the Sun King Talisman, actually. I would say the Pendant of the Lost Ages, just for those situations where you want to use it, where you benefit from having that silence and interrupt effect reduction. It can be useful in those cases. Very, very useful in those cases. But yeah, a neck, essentially. In the third position, I'd say Fang of the Leviathan. Just the power of this weapon cannot be understated for you as an Arcane Mage. Like, Warlocks could make use of the Merciless Gladiator Spellblade, because it does have spell hit, which they'd use. It has good spell power, but for you, you really want to have Fang of Leviathan. That's the third priority of an item. Some might question why I'd argue a neck is second place, just because of how important that neck can be in certain fights, and the fact that it's something you would use not just for a portion of the game, but for the rest of the game. It would be important in any situation where you're dealing with silence and interrupts. So those are the three items, the top three items. After that, the Mindstorm wristbands, very powerful wrist, a lot of competition for them. And then in the fifth position, 2 set tier 5. Preferably, the two biggest pieces, the two biggest upgrades are the shoulders and the helm. So helm and shoulders from tier 5. It doesn't matter which one you get first, but you want both of those. Getting that 2 set is what makes Arcane stronger, significantly stronger, because that's 20% damage to Arcane Blast. Mana cost goes up as well, so you need the Serpent Coil Braid to really make that work. But you combine the Serpent Coil Braid with 2 sets of Tirisfal, and you're in a strong position. So, just to recap, Serpent Coil, Braid, Neck from Morgrim, Fang, Mindstorm, and then 2 set tier 5. Those are your priorities. You could argue that 2 set tier 5 is probably the biggest priority. That's fair enough. But tier items, there's going to be plenty of tier items. There's going to be 2 pieces dropping from every boss. You're not really going to struggle with that. You may struggle getting those specific 2 pieces, but you can live with the tier 5, with getting tier 5 legs and shoulders. Shoulders going to be very easy. Or legs and gloves, you can live with that. Like, if you can, you shouldn't necessarily prioritize the gloves. Just bear that in mind, because if you still have Spellfire at this point, you still have the free set, because you're still using the chest, you're still using the belt. So maybe the gloves would actually be our lowest priority. Maybe what Arcane Mages should do, consideration here, is just use legs, chest, try and keep using Spellfire and not go 4 set. I know, that's a discussion to be had. Is 4 set worth it versus Spellfire? I don't know. I think that's a good deal for your crafting. I feel like 4 set is probably worth it more, but a discussion to be had for your crafting to be done. Anyway, Christine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.